Happy Friday. Welcome into Payoff Pitch. This is Action Network's MLB betting podcast presented by BetMGM. Brendan Glasheen joined on this Friday by Anthony DeBundo and BJ Cunningham. Payoff Pitch is live Monday, Tuesday, and Friday during the season. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. A full 15 gamer. We have a lot to get to. I want to go to DeBundo first, BJ, if that's all right.
That's okay.
With you, because then you can respond.
Sure.
There are a lot of pitchers on the mound today that just have very thick storylines and just a lot to dive into. So let's not waste time. DeBundo, you are on the Detroit Tigers today at Fenway Park, and you're fading Boston starting pitcher, a pitcher that we haven't seen in a while. Maybe he's been out for a bike ride or something before this start, on a bench, possibly, in the park. I don't think we're going to see much of him after tonight. So please tell us why you want to fade him now.
Well, this is more of a bet on Tarik Skubal, who I'm extremely impressed by thus far this season. I think he's come back from injury looking as good as he's ever looked. Skubal was a pitcher who consistently had home run problems in the past, and it was last year that he changed his pitch mix entirely and really found something that was working. Then he got shut down for the year. He was out with an injury. He's come back this year throwing harder than ever. His fastball velocity is up. His strikeout rate is up. His walk rate is down. Everything that he can control as a pitcher has made dramatic improvements this year, and that's the main reason he has a 2.3 xERA. He had one really bad start, and it was in one of the most friendly BABIP parks in all of baseball in Kansas City, where Kansas City just kind of like dinked and dunked a lot of singles and doubles in front of the outfield against him. It was not like he was getting crushed. And so when you look at his overall body of work, even getting limited to start, he was only pitching 4 or 5 innings. Now he's been fully stretched out. I think Skubal is a clearly top 30 pitcher in all of baseball right now. So, and you could even maybe make that higher if you want to throw out his track record a little bit and lean in on how good he's been this season. Chris Sale is also going to be on account, so I don't think we're going to see a full Chris Sale tonight. Like, I don't think he's throwing more than three to 4 innings. What's that?
Oh, no, I'm just counting the number of times you say his name. That we're up to
2. Yeah, I mean, Chris Sale, there's 2 more. He's only going to probably throw 3 to 4 innings tonight. I don't think he's on necessarily like a full leash here. He has made 2 starts in Worcester. He looked good in those 2 starts. But again, we're going to talk about another pitcher in a minute. Like, I don't necessarily read too much into the minor league rehab appearance information, because I don't think it tells us necessarily a ton about how he's going to perform against a major league lineup. And this Boston lineup against left-handed pitching, if you think about kind of how their lineup projects, most of their best bats hit from the left side, whether it's Devers, Tristan Casas is in that conversation now, Masataka Yoshida. Verdugo's been struggling, but they certainly don't platoon nearly as well against lefties as they do against righties. So I think it's a good matchup for Skubal. And I like the Tigers, plus 125, plus 130 out there. I like Detroit today as my best bet.
What would you take it down to as far as
probably plus 120? After that, it gets a little bit dicey because Boston still does have the better offense. And I do want to credit Sale. Like, he was pitching better prior to the injury, even though the stuff hadn't quite come all the way back. The strikeouts were back. So, he's always had that angle, that arm angle deception, that, how big he is, that can throw some hitters off. But the Tigers can also load up a lot of righties in that lineup, and they do hit lefties decently well this year relatively to their overall talent. So it could be a tricky matchup for Chris.
BJ, you're going to discuss the Tigers later, so why don't we just do this now? You are fair. You are a professional.
I am.
Fairness person.
I am.
And you're going against the Red Sox. You're going against Chris Sale.
Yeah, I mean, it's a simple projection edge for me. I have the Tigers at plus 111, so I think there's a decent edge on them tonight. Anthony mentioned that Chris Sale was good before he got injured. I think that kind of gets lost. I mean, if you look at some of his StatCast percentages, I mean, he was 71st percentile in expected weighted on base average allowed, was hardly walking guys. His strikeout rate was way up. He was pitching really well. And he pitched well in his, like Anthony mentioned, he pitched well in his 2 starts in the minor leagues. Detroit does project better against lefties than they do against righties. They're one of the worst lineups in baseball against righties, but they're closer to league average against lefties. So, and like Anthony mentioned, Tarik Skubal is a pitcher I'm also very high on. So I think it's a decent spot to back the Tigers with Chris Sale coming off that injury.
All right, very good. Chris Sale, the injury thing is a problem, and he is the in-season internal acquisition.
Yep.
The Red Sox.
Yep.
Big trade deadline acquisition.
Yeah,
this is him.
That's what
We
you
got
guys
more
both
coming,
forgot.
too.
This was
Yeah.
the trade deadline acquisition, right?
Trevor Story's back, right?
Yep, there's more coming.
And he's been horrible. Garrett Whitlock's coming. Well, Story has not been good. I mean, thankfully for his defense, but I'm not gonna.
How many at bats has Trevor Story had?
I don't know. I think he started like 0 for 7 or something.
But
he does give them a steady glove over at shortstop. Anywho, this isn't.
Hey, we're only 4 back now after.
Well, his arm works again.
Royals.
Remember he didn't have an elbow for like a year. That was
Yep.
tough. Yeah, he's had 11 at bats. He's had 1 hit.
One hit. How many strikeouts?
7. You got to give him some
sample
time.
size.
You got to give him some time.
Best bet today for BJ Cunningham is what?
It is the most boring, meaningless game on the slate.
This is fantastic.
The Oakland Athletics taking on the Washington Nationals. I think I like the under 9 runs here at even money. I think the total is a little too high. It's a little too high. Paul Blackburn going to be on the mound for the Rays. Actually, he's been a bright spot for them. 3.86 expected ERA. He's getting a ton of swings and misses. His K per 9 rate is up at 9.8. That's way higher than his career average his career high of 7.1. So what's changed is he's throwing his slider much more often. And it's a pretty nasty slider too. This season, he's throwing it 20% of the time. Last season, he was throwing about 4 or 5% of the time. He's got a 35% whiff rate on that pitch. Opposing hitters only have a 255 expected weighted on base average. Now, the stuff plus on that pitch isn't great, but his location has been amazing with it. That's why he's been having so much success with it. The Nationals lineup, they're one of the worst teams in baseball against right-handed pitching. 302 weighted on base average, 87 weighted runs created plus. It's bottom 5 in baseball. Yohan Adon, it's going to be on the mound for his second start of the season. He pitched pretty well to start the game against the Reds, and then he gave up 3 runs. And he's a pitcher that projects to be around a 5 ERA type pitcher. But he predominantly throws a fastball and a curveball as his main 2 pitches, which will be just fine against the A's because they only have a 208 expected batting average and a 303 expected weighted on base average against those 2 pitches, which probably wouldn't shock you to find out that's the worst mark in Major League Baseball. I only have 8.2 runs projected for this game, so 9 runs at even money, I think is decent value.
Yohan Adon had one of the most shocking performances I've ever seen last week in terms of relative to what my expectations were in Great American Ballpark.
Yep.
I think he had 6 no-hit innings and then gave up a 3-run homer in the 7th, but he was unreal. Do I think he can repeat that? A little skeptical.
But it's the A's lineup, so maybe
it is.
And the A's have been a above 500 over team this year. Now, has it been mostly to their credit and their offense? No, but on nights they can go off. We talked about the A's quite a bit.
And I will say this: both these bullpens terrify me if I'm taking an under. So if you wanted to go for F5, there's no problem there. I think you can maybe get under 5.5 at maybe a decent price right now, under 5. I wouldn't hate that either.
Okay.
All the Phillies needed last night was to get Corbin out of the game so they could get to that Nats bullpen to score some runs. So
yeah. And by the way, this is not an Apple TV game tonight. I don't know where you're going to find Nationals A's.
MLB TV would be my guess.
I was just saying to a friend the other day that I can't wait until the season's over so that we don't have to talk about the A's, Nationals, Tigers, Royals anymore, and we just only get to talk about the good teams. We get to do the postseason pods. Those are way more fun.
Let me see here. Under 5 runs, first 5 innings at BetMGM. Nationals, A's, minus 120. 5 on the nose.
Yep.
Okay, little different approach today to fade the public because we're actually picking a game as we record on a Friday morning that does not have the data loaded yet because, we don't have the data yet in the app, and that's not normal usually, but it's a good spot to discuss Dallas Keuchel, friend of the podcast. Dallas Keuchel made his Twins debut last Sunday, and heading into that game, looking at the action app from Sunday, August 6th, they played the Arizona Diamondbacks. D-backs they closed minus 154. They got 67% of the bets, 93% of the cash. And, it was one of the biggest differences in sides this year as far as the cash flow and the handle. With that being said, Dallas Keuchel, I did see his last start of 2022 last year at Fenway Park when he pitched for Texas, and the Red Sox ripped him apart the first couple innings. It was quite magical. Colin Whitchurch former Payoff Pitch co-host. He has been all over Dallas Keuchel, fading him. Former White Sox as well. It may have been with the White Sox, now that I think about it, that start last year for Dallas Keuchel. But anywho.
He's been around the last year or two.
He's been around. I think it was with Texas, though. I do think that's correct. It was with Texas last September. Anyway, we're projecting that listen to our projections and our data for a moment. We're projecting that people are going to pile in against Dallas Keuchel today, against the Twins. DeBundo, the Phillies are the team that they're playing against. What do you foresee happening as far as a line? And is there a way to back the Twins in some capacity, assuming your Philadelphia Phillies get a lot of love against Dallas Keuchel?
Yeah, so we need to have a whole conversation about Dallas Keuchel, because last season, I have the game log up. He pitched for the White Sox. Then he went to Arizona. Then he went to Texas. And you're right, it was Texas at Boston. He gave up 7 earned in 4.2 innings. He did have 6 strikeouts in that game.
I sat in center field. I saw the ball going everywhere. It was great.
But there were some ugly ones in there. He gave up 8 runs to the Giants, 7 to the Rockies. His last start in Chicago was at home against Boston when he gave up 6 runs, 6 in New York. He was quite frankly done as a starting pitcher and as a pitcher in Major League Baseball last season. But he did go to Driveline.
Here we go.
So he's basically a Cy Young candidate now. Now, he did go to Driveline in the offseason. And look, I took on a lot of my fellow colleagues and peers last week in betting the Minnesota Twins at home as a plus 130 dog against Zach Gallen with Dallas Keuchel. And it was not the particularly pleasant viewing experience. There was a lot of balls in play. But in a lot of ways, it was a vintage Keuchel game because he didn't strike anybody out. The stuff plus was not good. I'm not going to sit here and make the case that he's like this good pitcher. But the ball was on the ground the entire game. I think the Diamondbacks had 4 infield singles. The average exit velocities were pretty weak on most of those balls. He only got hit hard once or twice, and they were hit right at people. So he didn't give up any runs, or he gave up 1 run in 5 innings, scattered a bunch of runners, got a couple double plays. The Twins have done a remarkable job with their pitching development. And the main reason I actually bet him was because his last start in AAA, he was popping 33% called strike whiff numbers and striking out a ton of guys. And I know, I don't read a ton into it, but when you look at what he was last year versus the guy we saw in AAA, and then some of the weak contact he was able to induce against Arizona, I think there's a case to be made that maybe we shouldn't all be running to the window, Jake Arrieta style, Madison Bumgarner style, to fade him while we still can. Because the Phillies tonight, minus 160 with Chris Sanchez on the mound. Sanchez, somebody who doesn't really have a big track record, who's pitched really well this season, but does have a home run problem, which is dangerous against this Twins lineup that has a lot of power. And their lineup tonight without, Bryce Harper is considered day-to-day. I would be surprised if he played tonight. So potentially no Bryce Harper for Philadelphia would certainly lower this number. So it's Twins or nothing for me. And I'm going to spend the entire day debating if I want to bet against my Phils. But I think that the number is a little high on Philadelphia right now, given Sanchez, who I think is going to regress a little bit, and given the potential lineup issues for Philly, no Harper in the lineup potentially.
All right, what do you got, BJ? Any thoughts on Dallas Keuchel and how there might be an angle to go against him? And as DeBundo said, he did. This is a classic. If you just look at the game log and see the name, it's like Chris Sale. Now, you're going against Chris Sale today because you're fair.
I am.
But if you go against Dallas Keuchel, the number won't be as appealing.
Right. So Anthony kind of hit the nail on the head that this number is just a little too high for Chris Sanchez, who this year, in terms of you look at his expected metrics, has been let
me interject for a second here. Look, there's a line now up, and we've got some data in the Action app. There we go. Breaking news to the podcast. Phillies are getting 71% of the bets, 64% of the dollars.
How much of that percent of the dollars is Matt Mitchell?
Good question. I don't have that.
No, yeah. So I mean, I'm guessing that number will rise as we go. If I'm somebody who's I'm like Anthony, I projected the Phillies only at minus 111 for this game. Wow. If you look at a lot of the projections coming into this, Keuchel projected to be about a 5.2 ERA type pitcher, which is like below average, but not like catastrophically bad. And if you look around, especially if you're going to be betting full game here, the Twins bullpen comparatively to the Phillies bullpen projects out pretty similar. They're pretty even. The Twins don't hit lefties that well, but like Anthony mentioned, there's going to be no Bryce Harper in the lineup for the Phillies, and they've been a below average team against left-handed pitching. And especially for the Twins, I don't think they're just going to let Keuchel keep going as he keeps getting shelled. Like the first sign of trouble, my guess is they're going to take him out, and they're going to, they've kind of gotten away with this last game. His expected ERA in that start was 5.3. So like, he did get hit. Like Anthony said, he did get hit hard a couple of times, and that's what that, registers as. But again, this is high as in terms of a price. So I'm not sure where this line's going to go. Even if you look at, where Arizona opened up at and where they closed at, it wasn't like they just got completely and utterly steamed to the point where they're like minus 170. I mean, they opened around, minus 145 and they closed like minus 150. So it's an interesting debate here of whether I actually want to back Keuchel, because like, it's one of the, in betting, it's one of those things where it's like, this is disgusting. And if I do it and he completely implodes, it's like, well, I'm a complete idiot. Of course that was going to happen. Right. But again, it is a projection edge for me. So I'm going to wait. The best price you can find out there on the Twins right now is plus 150.
Yep.
If we get if we get plus 155, I will have to fire on that. I mean, I'm already projecting, an edge right now, but I think this might get a little higher.
Plus 150 is kind of implying Bryce may play, but we have not had any information on that yet. So I'm going to have to figure out if he's in or not. But plus 150 with no Bryce Harper is too high, for sure. I will bet that.
Some plus 135s out there, and Colin Whitchurch has already bet Twins first 5.
He's on the Twins?
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. Phillies first 5. Pardon me.
I was going to say, if he's on the Twins, I might have to be out.
That wouldn't be consistent with Colin Whitchurch and his fading of Dallas Keuchel. Philadelphia Phillies minus half a run, first 5 innings at minus 114.
Brendan, are you getting a little nervous about that win total under for the Phils? Because I am.
I was kind of nervous already for a while. When they started 7 games under 500, I thought, okay, great start. And then they picked it up. They're too talented. They're too good. It didn't come down to the wire. It should be fun.
It is.
But those of you, Zerillo said this the other day, if you've got the 89.5, that's nice. I've got 88. So,
I think they're going to, I got a feeling they're getting to 90, but we'll see.
Okay. All right. There you go. So another segment where we're talking about an old, washed-up left-handed pitcher. Mm-hmm. Let's see if it continues. Well, DeBundo, you're going to fade a lefty today. Blake Snell, who's in the Cy Young conversation, but he walks too many guys now. Huh?
Somehow. Cy Young, Blake. Look, we all had fun, right? We had that conversation, and I think we all kind of predicted it. I mean, the roller coaster of Blake Snell, if you follow along all season long, early in the year, there were a lot of conversations about Blake Snell and whether he was cooked. The strikeout rate was down. Everything was wrong. And I was like, well, like, we've all seen this before from Blake Snell. He's going to be fine. And then he was, Sandy Koufax for like 3 months. Nobody could touch him. He was striking out like 12 dudes a game. And then everybody was like, well, yeah, he's the Cy Young. And now I'm like, well, wait a minute. We've all seen this from Blake Snell too. Like this is the Blake Snell experience. And we're now coming down the mountain on Blake Snell quite a bit. And if you look at like his rolling charts, the strikeout minus walk rate is really taking a tumble in the last month. And that concerns me. So he's maintained his elite ERA numbers, but the strikeout minus walk rates, which were as high as like 30+%, which is Spencer Strider only level stuff for the season, he's now back down like close to 10, which is like replacement level starter stuff. So, he gets an Arizona lineup, which is pretty disciplined. They don't chase outside of the zone a ton. And Ryan Nelson continues to be a pitcher that I lose money on repeatedly. And I will be doing that once again today, betting Arizona plus 140 at home against Snell. Look, this Padres stuff in the market. Look, anybody can look at their run differential and acknowledge that, yes, they have been unlucky. But their approach with runners in scoring position is terrible. They don't seem to like, I'm not a big chemistry guy, but things are off in San Diego. And it's beyond like just looking at their Pythag and saying, yes, they've been unlucky, because they get steamed every single day in the market and the results continue to speak for themselves. And so I'm sure they'll have a winning run at some point because they are a good team. But the way the market prices them, like minus 170 on the road in Arizona. I know Arizona's playing awful right now. They've lost eight in a row. But, Blake Snell has now become overrated. He went from underrated and now he's overrated, all within the same season. The market has gotten a little drunk on Blake, and I'm going to bet against him.
The Padres have won 3 consecutive games in which Blake Snell has started, but nothing that knocks your socks off as far as how he's pitched in these games, and the walks are a problem. BJ, I was looking at the schedule and some of the lines this morning before we went on, and I'm happy to see that you picked a team that I thought made some sense based on their price that you like for an underdog.
I like the Cubs. Best price you can find out there is plus 136 right now. I mean, Jose Barrios is always a good fade candidate. He's drastically overperformed this season. I think we've mentioned that like 5 million times in this podcast. 3.38 ERA, expected ERA up at 4.59. And just for an example, if everybody's like, oh, well, what's been happening with Jose Barrios, or can you point to a certain game? Like the 2 starts before his start, his last start against Boston, he had a 5.2 xFIP against the Angels and a 7.7 xFIP against the Dodgers, and he only gave a combined 3 runs in those 2 starts. His main pitch is a slurve, which has been overperforming comparatively to his actual weighted on base average versus his expected weighted on base average allowed. And the reason this is a good spot is because the Cubs are the hottest offense in baseball. I mean, over the past 30 days, they've, obviously went on this insane run, but their run value has been the best of any team against breaking pitches. So, obviously Barrios, the slurve is a unique pitch. It's obviously a combination between a curveball and a slider. So he's one of the only guys who actually throws that type of pitch. So we don't have a lot of data on, teams against a slurve, but especially against breaking pitches, the Cubs have been excellent over the last 30 days. The Cubs are going to the bullpen game. Javier Assad will be on the mound. You probably only see the order one time through, my guess, and then the Cubs will go to the bullpen. I mean, he's been an average pitcher by all of his metrics, and the Cubs bullpen as well has been pretty average, but hopefully they can give them a bunch of different looks, a bunch of different arms, and stay away from just throwing Blue Jays straight fastballs, which they absolutely mash. So I only have the Blue Jays projected at minus 113. I think this price is a little too high for Jose Barrios, and especially how hot the Cubs lineup has been. So I like the Cubs at plus 136.
Hey, Chicago, what do you say? The Cubs are going to win today.
Yeah,
unfortunately, not at home.
DeBundo bet some Cubs futures on Tuesday when we had him on the podcast.
They are not at home today, though, so no Cubs 0.5, unfortunately.
That's true.
I think we're back next week. I got to look at the schedule, but
well, I did.
Well, hold on a second. You can't say that we're back next week if you're not going to actually do it, because last week you said that about the Braves game.
Again, we have to wait for the conditions. I can't forecast the weather that accurately 7 days out.
But the good news is, Brendan, we're 2-0 this year.
That's all that matters.
It's all that matters, right?
Let's see.
We're 0-1 we're 0-1 and I'm betting it, but it's not a system play. So.
Oh, they got the Royals at home next week, so 2:20 start. Let's pray for some good weather and some good wind in Wrigley because we're going to be betting it. But
I may or may not be going to that game. Who knows?
There you go. Big trip to the big city for BJ.
Yep. I don't get out a lot.
Weather report, a wind update.
I'll be there.
Please.
I don't know that I'm on next week. I have to look at my look at the schedule, but if I am on, maybe I'll send in a special report. I'll just text somebody and say, "Hey, look, we're betting Cubs 0.5." Or we're not.
You might have to go because I'm going to be in Chicago that weekend.
Yeah, you text BJ as much as you don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you text him.
Now, BJ and I are on good terms again. I just want to, we've had a really good soccer run, so we're on good terms.
Yep,
that's good.
The feud from a couple weeks ago is over. We've moved past it.
It's a long season. There's ups and downs in these relationships, as well as the bets. You each have one more to give out, and then we can get the heck out of here. BJ's got another total play, and so does DeBundo. So why don't you go ahead, BJ?
Yeah, I like over 9 in Dodgers and Rockies. Lance Lynn versus Austin Gomber. I mean, immediately when I saw this, I was just like, oh my gosh, that is way, way too low of a total. I mean, Lance Lynn, he's still projecting out to be pretty below average. Like, I know his ERA is at 6 and he's a positive regression candidate. And we've talked at length about how he's gotten a little bit better, but your expected ERA is still sitting around 5. So that's still not good. And I know Austin Gomber has pitched better, but going up against this Dodgers lineup is frightening when you have a pitcher like Omber who has been as bad as he's been for large stretches of the season. So, and I projected 9.8 runs for this game. So over 9, even money. It's a decent price. And I also, like I already mentioned before, I am also on the Tigers.
Yep, there's an 8.5 for Dodgers Rockies available right now at BetMGM, -115, over 8.5 runs.
Well, I've already bet over 9 at even, but I would definitely take over 8.5 at -115.
Lance Lynn's back. The Dodgers have fixed him. Their pitching lab.
Yeah.
They got him throwing only curveballs now. It's great.
Yep. Of course they have.
The A's were taking him yard a few times, a few starts back, but the A's, as we learned earlier, the A's do have some pop in that lineup when they choose to be.
Every once in a while.
All right, Tabundo, and you've got one more for us. It's a featured matchup between the Orioles and the Mariners.
Yeah, the Mariners are hot. Their lineup is showing some signs of life. Julio Rodriguez bringing some pop to the lineup for the first time all year, pretty much. And
by the way, that catch he made, he faked that he didn't catch the ball in center field.
Oh, with Tatis, yeah,
badass.
That was awesome.
Coolest thing I've seen on a baseball field in a long time.
Yeah, Charlie was cursing him out because he had the Padres, of course, but he
leave Charlie alone. Just when you started talking about being on good terms with BJ, now you're going to start crap with Charlie.
I don't know if I can leave him alone until I get a picture of him sitting on a park bench looking at the sky.
We love Charlie, but I like the over in this game, 7.5. And I'm a broken record. I say it every 5 days. I have bet against Luis Castillo just about every start he's made this season. And I'm not going to change that here, though. Instead, I'm going with the over because I'm much lower than the market on Kyle Gibson, too. Gibson's actually had a solid year. He's put together some pretty solid pitch to contact performances. But Castillo, look, I think this is a matter of the strikeout minus walk rate is the same as always. And the FIP is similar, but the market's pricing him like he always has been. But this change in pitch mix has led to more homers, and his command has not been quite as good. So he's been leaving more pitches middle this year and getting barreled. His barrel rate's 4% higher than normal. So do I think he'll consistently be that for the rest of his career? No, but switching from the sinker mix to the more fastball heavy mix, four-seam heavy mix, has led to a lot more barrels and more fly balls out of the park. So I think that's the main difference with Castillo. I think it is real and sustainable and not just a fluke home run luck. So the fact the market keeps him where he's been, I don't agree with it. And I think that the swinging strike rate's also down. So I'm going with the over, 7.5.
And Kevin Brown is reportedly back in the booth tonight for the Orioles.
Public shaming works. And also, Brandon, you better think twice about ever saying any negative statistics when you're doing broadcasts.
Yeah.
Because you could get canned in a second, man.
Yeah.
There was
especially on this one. If you give me any negative Red Sox stats, I'm going to have to go tattle to Matthew Mitchell. Get you suspended.
It's a report, though. It's not official if you know Brown's back tonight. But the Athletic, Baltimore Banner, multiple sources, Brown is set to return to the air Friday, August 11th when the Orioles face the Mariners.
Rich Aroli is well connected. I trust her. I think she's, we'll see. Tonight, I'm going to have to watch the Open. I can't wait to see what he says next.
Is that going to be the most watched Open of a baseball game this season, in the regular season at least? It has to be, right?
Has to be up there. And they have a local broadcast tonight, right? They're on an Apple TV game.
Oh,
just double checking.
Well, oh my gosh. Put my tinfoil hat on. Let me put my tinfoil hat on here really
quick. Funny story. The Tigers showed Michael Lorenzen's no hitter. Like they showed the highlight at the stadium at Comerica Park, like him getting a no hitter for the Phillies, and we're like, congrats to former Tiger Michael Lorenzen. Everybody was on Twitter, really, and like the scoreboard operator would be taken out in handcuffs if he did that in Baltimore.
By the way, I got to put my tinfoil hat on here, Brendan. If the Orioles Opens aren't getting much watch these days, leading into their games, what's the best way to get people to watch? Maybe suspend your broadcaster for no reason, and then bring him back, and then suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, everybody's like, I got to see this.
And the ratings go back up. Yeah,
the ratings go back up.
Thankfully for Kevin Brown and Masson and that whole crew, they did not lose that series finale to Houston. So they're going into this game with a little juice. It's fascinating how they might open up this broadcast, but it's another good series for the Orioles.
How would you do it if you were Kevin Brown? Brendan, before we get out of here. If you were Kevin Brown, you just got suspended for something stupid, and you're coming on the open, but you want to still keep your job at Masson. How do you open this?
You just focus on the game and you explain how the Orioles were phenomenal with their poise down the stretch, despite Jose Altuve.
You don't mention it at all.
Oh no, I can't say that. I can't say Altuve owned them in the series. That's just too
right.
So look forward to that. Kevin Brown reportedly back in the booth tonight for the Orioles TV broadcast. Anthony DiBundo and BJ Cunningham are in the Action app always, and now they have got their baseball hats back on, not soccer. Well, they'll still be soccer, but they're focused on baseball. So keep an eye on them in the app, especially if they want to fade Dallas Keuchel or somehow side with Dallas Keuchel.
It's him or nothing.
The Minnesota Twins. Thank you all for tuning in. We return on Monday, and that'll do it for this Friday edition of Payoff Pitch, Action Network's MLB betting podcast presented by BetMGM. You all have a fantastic weekend. Go find yourself a park bench if you are not feeling great about life, and we'll talk to you Monday. See ya.